and do not necessarily reflect those of Troy University. The opinions expressed on this program represent the viewpoints of individual authors or contributors and do not necessarily reflect those of Troy University.
Hello and welcome to EconVersations. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Sutter of the Johnson Center for Political Economy at Troy University. The federal government operates dozens of programs to assist low-income Americans in various ways, and some of these assistance programs have even been called entitlement programs. But the United States has never enshrined a right of individuals to receive welfare assistance. Recently, some scholars and commentators have proposed that we should adopt what's been termed a basic income guarantee for all Americans. What exactly is such a guarantee, and how would it work, and how much might it cost? And why have a number of libertarian scholars who normally favor a small government come out in favor of an income guarantee as a less intrusive form of assistance? What are the advantages and disadvantages of an income guarantee? Joining me on EconVersations today to talk about this big idea is my colleague from the Johnson Center, Dr. John Dove. Welcome back to the show, John.
Thanks again for having me, and thanks again for the opportunity to actually be able to host this episode of EconVersations.
Yes, because we're going to change it up today, and you're going to ask me the questions here today. So
that's right, and asking the tough questions.
Yeah, so let's get started here.
Yeah, so I think this is a very big issue, one that's been discussed quite a bit recently. But many viewers might actually not be aware of what exactly this basic income guarantee is. So given that, why don't you take a moment to just kind of explain what that is and then how it actually compares to current welfare programs.
Sure. So BIG is short for a basic income guarantee. And the idea behind that, there are various different forms of a income guarantee, but they all sort of basically say that all Americans should perhaps receive a certain amount of money or should be guaranteed to receive a certain amount of money in income every year. And so probably the simplest form to understand would be the idea of simply giving every American citizen, either adult or sometimes both adults and children, a certain amount of money every year. So they might get, say, for instance, $10,000 from the government every year. And actually, a sociologist named Charles Murray was one of the first people to really promote this idea. Recently, in a book he called In Our Hands, and he proposed this idea of this basic income guarantee as a way to replace all of our existing welfare programs.
Okay, so this then would this be a program that would be on top of welfare programs, or it actually would then do away with other welfare programs? How exactly might that work, and who might then end up also receiving some of these benefits?
So there are some different versions of it, but the main basic idea would be to say we're going to have one assistance program, which would be this basic income guarantee, that would just give cash or give assistance to all Americans, and we would then replace all the various different programs that we have. So currently we have lots of different programs that provide a lot of what is known as in-kind assistance to low-income Americans. So we do have welfare programs that do actually give cash, but then we also have things like free student lunch programs for low-income children in low-income households. We have Medicaid that provides health insurance for low-income Americans. We have various forms of energy assistance program, help paying energy bills. So the idea would be to take all these different programs, get rid of them all, turn them into one income transfer or income guarantee program.
Well, then, based on that, I guess, given the amount of assistance that probably is, given on an annual basis, what would be, a number that's been proposed as to, how much an individual should receive, and again, would this be a benefit that all individuals would receive, or just particular individuals?
Charles Murray, in his proposal, threw out the idea of $10,000 per person, which if the idea of this would be to replace all of our given welfare or assistance programs to the poor, to get families with children up above the poverty line, it would probably have to be $10,000 for every adult and every child. Because if you had a household with one adult and two children, $10,000 is not going to get that household up above the poverty line. But you would have, if the idea was truly to replace all the other programs with this one program, I think it would have to include an assistance for children. And then generally it's going to be restricted to U.S. citizens. Mm-hmm. And then based on, again, whether it be all adults or just adults or all citizens, one variation. And then there's some different forms in which you could say, like, oh, perhaps you could, if people's income fell below this level, you could give them a transfer through the income tax system. Alternatively, it's probably, again, as I mentioned, probably the more straightforward thing would simply be everybody would receive one time a year this payment for the year of a given amount. And in that regard, it would be very similar to what the state of Alaska currently does with their permanent fund, where they take revenues from oil and put it in the permanent fund, and then every Alaskan receives a payment from the state to reflect the value of the royalties that have been collected from oil and other minerals.
Oh, that's interesting. So I guess one maybe sort of a similar idea came up in the 1970s with this, an idea of the negative income tax, which I believe the earned income tax credit actually kind of came out of that and is in some ways similar. So I guess, based on that, how similar would this program then be to something like this negative income tax? And then what exactly is, a negative income tax?
The negative income tax was proposed initially by Milton Friedman, another libertarian economist, and the way that would work is that you would use the income tax system to, if a person's income was low enough that they would receive, instead of making a positive tax payment to the government based on their income they'd earn, they would receive a negative payment. In other words, a transfer from the government. And so Friedman's idea was, I think, at the core, very similar to the idea of a basic income guarantee, especially if the income guarantee is going to be administered through the tax system. So you could, in effect, use the tax system to get the money to everybody in that fashion, with, in some cases, people receiving a negative payment that would be their assistance.
Huh. So, for proponents of this program, how exactly do they see this as being an improvement on current anti-poverty measures? What specifically are sort of the mechanisms here?
Sure, and that's an important question. And the answer to that question comes into all the various different programs that we've put together. I think Michael Tanner from the Cato Institute has actually gone through and tried to tally up all of the different means-tested programs that the federal government has. Means-tested would be the shorthand to say, based on the amount, your eligibility would be based on the amount of income that you earn. And therefore, those would be, in effect, poverty assistance or poverty alleviation programs. Welfare would be one example of this. But Tanner comes up with a total of over 120 different programs. And total spending on all those programs in 2012 exceeded $1 trillion. So we're spending about $1 trillion on that. And if you just take $1 trillion and divide by the number of Americans who are below the poverty line, that works out to over $20,000 per every American, including children that are actually below the poverty line. So clearly, although we're spending an enormous sum of money on anti-poverty programs, most as low-income Americans would be able to testify, they're not receiving $20,000 per person from the government. And the difference comes in the form of, there's certainly a lot of overhead on these different programs. A lot of bureaucrats who are working for the different agents for these different programs. You have 126 different programs. Again, if they're means tested, you have to have people in place to try to verify that the recipients actually have low enough incomes to qualify. And so it just takes a lot of effort, a lot of bureaucrats to administer all these programs. And so this would be the basic idea. $10,000 would be less than half the cost of our current programs, and so we'd probably be able to get at least the same amount of assistance perhaps to low-income Americans as they currently receive under these different programs.
That's a pretty telling number there. So again, I guess is that really ultimately kind of the issue then that exists with current anti-poverty measures, just sort of the administrative costs associated with it, and because of that, it just seems that we're unable to really properly target these benefits to those individuals?
That's certainly a big part of it. And so not just not target the benefits, but then since the benefits are in the form of in-kind benefits in many cases, that you can get your energy bills paid for as opposed to receiving cash. We know from economics, we cover in our classes that we teach our economics majors, that in-kind transfers involve a form of inefficiency, that people would generally prefer to receive cash because they could either spend it on the things that they're receiving in kind, or they could spend it on something else. And so if they spend it on something else, they would, by their own choices, be demonstrating that they would be getting more satisfaction, more utility out of spending it on the things that they want instead of the things that government's giving them through these different programs. So that's a part of it. But then there's also a whole issue of work disincentives that are created through all these different programs.
So I guess, if we did actually have this universal income or basic income guarantee, then do you actually think that it would be a situation where it could conceivably reduce these administrative costs and sort of the bureaucratic bloat that exists, or is this more just kind of wishful thinking?
There's certainly the potential. And I think there's an important question as to whether or not we could actually succeed in repealing all of these different programs. And we certainly have thousands of welfare bureaucrats administering these systems. So it is a fair question, and we certainly know bureaucrats do a good job of effectively lobbying to maintain the programs that they administer because they don't like to lose their jobs. So there is certainly some very important political questions as to whether or not we could succeed in abolishing all of our existing income assistance programs. But if we could, it surely seems like there's some savings here. And I think ultimately we should recognize that our anti-poverty programs exist to assist low-income Americans, not to provide jobs for bureaucrats. And so I think ultimately, if we could streamline this, and we should be able to, we should try to, if that's what we want to choose to do. And again, presumably, if the basic income guarantee could be administered through the income tax system, we would be able to administer all these the income guarantee through the existing IRS. So we shouldn't need more bureaucrats than we currently already have with the IRS to administer sort of the tax transfer system.
So, another issue that people have pointed out is, how it is that the current welfare system might affect or, incentivize or disincentivize individuals to work. How would that compare, if we did have this basic income guarantee? What would be sort of the incentive effects toward actually getting out and finding gainful employment and working?
This is a really important point, and it's certainly a big disadvantage of our current system. Now, economists, when we talk about tax policy, we like to emphasize the importance of marginal tax rates. Mm-hmm. Marginal tax rates would be the amount of tax that you would pay on the next, say, $100 or next $1,000 of income that you earn. And it's the marginal tax rate as opposed to your average tax rate, which would be, the average tax rate would be the percentage of your income that you pay in taxes. The marginal tax rate is what it matters when people decide, do they want to work a little bit more or not. If you work some more and you earn an extra $1,000 in income, what's important then is how much in taxes do you pay on that $1,000. And we consistently emphasize the need to try to keep marginal tax rates as low as possible, because marginal tax rates are what lead to the work disincentives.
So how exactly would that work then, especially given the current welfare state? Again, we talk about things like effective tax rates, and if I'm earning a dollar from some sort of welfare program currently, what can potentially happen if I do go out and work, and how does that compare then to the issue with marginal tax rates?
Right. So I think this is the good point to recognize that although low-income Americans generally aren't going to be paying any income taxes, and that's by design, the idea of the marginal tax rate still is relevant because it would be an effective marginal tax rate. So the question would be, how much in the way of benefits would you lose when you earn the extra $1,000 of income? And that's a tough question to address simply because we have like 126 different programs here. We have 126 different programs, but it is important that people have an incentive to go out and take jobs and try to make money. And it's difficult, but if you go through carefully and try to tally up some of these different programs, we see that there are a number of what have been dubbed welfare cliffs. That there are a number of points at which people earn some extra money and they lose eligibility for some of these different programs. And there are points along here where you might earn an extra $500 of income and actually lose $600 worth of benefits, where you could have a marginal tax rate that can actually exceed 100%. And if it doesn't exceed 100%, it can be up over 90% in some of these welfare cliffs. And if we understand generally that people aren't going to work more if they don't see a return from it, if we do have to have incentives of different kinds to incentivize work, then it sort of makes sense. Like, why would somebody go out? Why would a low-income American go out and work an extra work hours to earn an extra $1,000 if that's just going to cost them $900 in benefits? Their return on their time working is only $100, not $1,000. And with such high marginal or effective marginal tax rates are going to be recognized as a clear work disincentive. And so this is another potential major advantage of a basic income guarantee.
Right, because it seems then that, again, with the basic income guarantee, am I right with this, where if we had such a system, then if you go out and work, right, you don't actually lose any of this benefit then. So there's not really sort of that disincentive effect that might exist in the current welfare system.
Right, or at least what you can do is definitely bring that marginal tax rate or effective marginal tax rate down. Mm-hmm. And so by, in effect, taxing the income guarantee away through the income tax, whatever income tax rate you set, that's in effect sort of how people are losing their income guarantee. They wouldn't be losing their income guarantee. They might still receive $10,000, but they know that if they pay like $1,000 in taxes, mm-hmm. their net transfer from the government would have gone down from $10,000 to $9,000. But that net transfer from the government would be going down based on the marginal tax rates that we could set through the income tax. And it would simply be a matter of not setting the marginal tax rate so high.
So, turning to cost now, because I think that's an important consideration, is $10,000 per person really does seem like a very large sum of money. You have anything to?
Yeah, it definitely is. And so on first glance, it appears like it would be tremendously costly. If you had it for every adult citizen, it would be about perhaps $2.2 or $2.3 trillion at $10,000 a piece. For every citizen, you're talking about perhaps $3 trillion. Now, to put that in perspective, the federal government is currently spending about just under $4 trillion right now. So you'd be talking about a program that would be adding anywhere from 50 to maybe 75% of current total current federal spending. So it would be an enormous amount of money when you look at it that way. Now you do have to remember we're spending currently about $1 trillion on these various different welfare type or means tested programs, and presumably the idea is that the basic income guarantee would replace all of that. So there would be about $1 trillion of current spending that would go away. But you're still talking for a universal basic income guarantee of perhaps an extra $2 trillion in government spending.
Wow. So would that actually then in any sort of way require increased tax rates overall for current individuals?
It might, but one thing to keep in mind in terms of how would we collect the extra tax, $2 trillion in taxes, is that currently income is exempted under the income tax on the grounds that if somebody's starting out and we want to make sure that they have enough money to support their family, we don't actually start taking any money out for income taxes until people reach a relatively high level of income. And that's why about 40% of American households don't pay any income tax. They don't end up owing any income tax, because once you figure in their exemptions and the earned income tax credit, that about 40% of households don't end up owing or paying any federal income tax. If everybody starts with $10,000 per person, we could actually have perhaps a 15 or 20% marginal tax rate that could apply to the first dollar of income that people actually go out and earn. Because we know that it's $1,000 that they're earning on top of the $10,000 that they already have. So we could have taxes, we would be taxing a lot of income that we currently aren't taxing. And that could factor in on all of our marginal tax rates. So we could have slightly higher marginal tax rates when people are earning $30,000 a year, because it's $30,000 on top of the income guarantee. So we can take that into account. In effect, for most Americans, they pay $10,000 or more in taxes. They would receive the $10,000 in the income guarantee. They would be paying more taxes. It would end up being a wash. They would receive $10,000, but it would have to essentially end up paying that back because you'd earn high enough incomes that you'd more than pay back the income guarantee.
Interesting. Changing gears a little bit here. You had mentioned earlier that cash transfers are generally preferable, or are preferable to in-kind transfers. Kind of along those lines, I think from a more normative perspective too, some people would argue that allowing for cash transfers actually reduces much of the paternalistic aspects that are associated with some of the current welfare programs. Do you see this as being an advantage in that sense in any way, or how do you view that?
Many libertarians see this as an advantage, and I certainly see the argument in saying that it is an advantage. We certainly would be empowering Americans who are receiving money from the government more to be able to choose what it is they want to spend, and in fact treating them like adults would be important. But there also would be a disadvantage that would arise, especially when you're talking about if it's a cash transfer that would include a transfer for children, because if their parents weren't going to spend the money in the right way, it's quite possible that somebody, especially for children, could receive this, receive the income guarantee, choose not to spend their money in such a way as to make sure that their children have money to take to school and pay for a school lunch, and then we're left in this situation that the child doesn't have the basic necessities that we feel they need to have, and there would be a danger then if the parents have already squandered all of that money on other things, well, we would still have to end up having to help out a child. Or if somebody's squandered all of their money that their income guarantee, and they don't have any money to spend on a place to stay, then again, would we have to provide them extra assistance? And so I think that's a legitimate question. So the paternalism issue cuts both ways, and I think there certainly is a danger that we'd end up providing additional assistance beyond the $10,000 if people squandered it.
I think that's a really important point too. Another thing to think about is that although we've talked about the possible work incentives that might be created, there are a number of individuals that have suggested that it may actually providing a basic income guarantee may actually disincentivize work and may lead some individuals to just avoid work altogether. What are the issues there, and how do you see some of those?
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because we have to recognize that people could undertake things like decide to surf all day long, or mountain climbing, or play volleyball, or play video games. And I think this is an important issue of whether people would be ever joining the workforce at all. We certainly have seen a problem of young adults not joining the workforce after completing college, or when they probably should be. And if people are receiving $10,000 a year from the government, it might even delay or prevent people from joining the workforce in any meaningful sense altogether. And I think that's a real problem. It's not inconsistent with the point where we made earlier about the better work incentives, because if people are going to work, those welfare cliffs affect whether they're going to work earn an extra $1,000. So the danger we're talking about here is the fact that people might never choose to enter the workforce, might attempt to sort of live off the $10,000 that they're receiving from the government, or you had several young people get together and decide that they could live off of $30,000 together instead of any of them going out and getting jobs. And so we would be subsidizing a whole range of leisure type of activities, which could prevent people from ever joining the workforce.
Huh. And then, kind of a final point to wrap this up, but ties back to, your introduction, which is, you noted that there's no actual right to any of these entitlement programs currently, but, this system would probably actually kind of change that equation. So, what are some of your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's an important, another thing to point out is that although we call a number of things entitlement programs, and it suggests that people are entitled to receive them, there's no right to receive this. The entitlement just refers to the structure of the program and how appropriations or how money gets spent out of the programs. We've never accepted or enshrined any type of a right to receive government assistance. And I think that although Americans are tremendously generous, both personally and also through supporting government programs to assist the less fortunate in our society, I think most Americans also support the idea that able-bodied adults should be working and supporting themselves. And I think this is an important point to recognize for our prosperity, because our prosperity, all the goods and services that we consume and support our standard of living today, do have to be produced. And that ultimately means that somebody has to be working. Nothing's going to get produced to support our modern lifestyle unless somebody gets out and produces. Now, we're a rich enough country that we can certainly afford to not have everybody work as we might have needed to in the past. But this idea that people have to work for a living, and that everybody accepts that when you're an adult, you have to live and support yourself, you have to work for a living and support yourself that way. And that applies to basically everybody unless you're truly disabled to an extent that you can't work, I think is an important part of our social compact. And our current welfare or cash assistance programs are based around the whole idea that you should be working and supporting yourself, and only if you can't are you going to get assistance. And Americans really don't like to just hand out money to people for not doing anything. And I think that is an important consideration that we need to factor in here. Is that a basic income guarantee would be an important step in a different direction than we've gone. And I think ultimately, we have to be very careful about considering that, because I think between the disincentives of people never joining the workforce and undermining the work deal could end up really changing things. So. Well, I guess it's time for me to say thanks, John, for coming on and turning the tables and asking me the questions.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us. Join us again next time for another EconVersations.